What is up, guys, and welcome once again to another episode of the Ebby Space Agency Career Mode series here on Kerbal Space Program. We're here today then for episode number 16, and we're here to continue basically developing new technologies. After last episode, we started taking some tentative steps towards space planes, as well as continued our construction of an orbital refinery around Minmus. So exciting times here in the research and development labs within the Ebby Space Agency Research Center. And yeah, the first thing we're going to do then is take a look at some sort of local missions before we start working on some new tech. And the first thing we're going to do is going to head down to Kahave Sands in our Scuff Airlines plane here, just to open up the airfield and again, you know, get landing rights, see if we can use it later on down the line. As yeah, you see we're just flying along here. We've seen this thing take off, we've seen it land before. We don't need to cover too much, but we are going to cover the approach into the airfield, because obviously it's a new place. We've not seen this before, right? So you see we take a nice wide approach in and we set ourselves up quite nicely, nice and smooth, before we go in for our final approach there for landing. Quite straightforward, quite nice, I think. And then yeah, we're just keeping ourselves nice and slow before we touch down. So you know, we're gonna go speak to the executives, the business Kerbals in charge here at Kahave Sands, and see if they'll let us land aircraft and potentially other stuff here later on down the line. So yeah, we taxi on over to the hangars, and we go speak to the bigwigs. And yeah, they agreed, guys. They've signed the paper. They've told us that we can absolutely land stuff here as long as we drop off a few snacks along the way. And we agree to those terms, and we take off and we head on back to the KSC. The range away from the KSC here was actually large enough that, just to be a bit preemptive, we did have to start sort of pumping fuel out from the reserve tanks into the main tanks, just to make sure that we are able to make it home without running out. This aircraft has plenty of fuel. It could probably circumnavigate Kerbin, to be honest, with the amount of fuel it's got, but we tend to use the fuel in the engines instead of the reserve tank in the center there, just to try and keep things a little bit balanced during flight. You know, we kind of use the fuel as ballast as well as reserves. But yeah, we come in nicely over the top of the mountains here. We take control of the aircraft a little bit early, just to avoid that peak there. I think that's K2. I want to say that's K2. I swear it got given a name before in like previous given aircraft to purpose mods, but we avoid the mountain nonetheless and continue our descent down into the central runway here at the KSC airport. Again, quite a long sort of float down, just to bleed off a little bit extra speed. We've got the runway to do it, and then yeah, we touch down a little bit bouncy. Again, a bit of a Ryanair-esque landing. I keep trashing them every time I do that landing, but hey, they've got that stereotype for a reason, right, guys? But yeah, Cloudtop and Gwenany circle the aircraft round to the hangar without any further issues. But we are now going to go over to the VAB. We still are working with wings, guys, but we are going to take the space plane that we designed last episode, and we are going to turn it into a shuttle. That's right, we are coming up with variants of this spacecraft and seeing how best we can utilize it. So we stick 3 boosters on here. A bit of an interesting design choice, sure, but the idea is that we don't have to. We move the center of thrust through the center of mass on ascent. It still has a few design quirks, as you'll see later on, but I'm going to hand you over to the takeoff / launch now. And yeah, you see there on the initial takeoff, it does have some balance issues. The idea with the 3 boosters was obviously to, you know, try and manage that as best we could without angling engines. However, we end up having to do something a little bit wild with the boosters here, as you're about to see. We end up having to fire them off as if they're missiles, because that bottom booster on the belly of the aircraft, we had to set it as a less the two strapped to the big fuel tank on top. We had to give them a lower thrust limiter, which meant that they burnt through their fuel slower, and then eventually, obviously, ran out of fuel afterwards, right? So it basically caused a massive shift on the sort of just before the stage, which was a bit dodgy. So instead, we figured we'd waste about 20 meters per second of the boosters, what they would give us, and just fired them off early. It is very entertaining. It's a bit nuts, but it is still it works, right? And then we then utilized all the fuel out of this tank, basically rolled over along the prograde axis and drop that off. We're still we're about 30 kilometers up, and we're going about 1700 meters per second, so we are absolutely going to space. But this thing has a crazy long ascent profile, because we're going that sort of speed. We can't really stray too far from the prograde marker, to be honest, guys. Not without falling apart. It just won't let us. It always seems to circle back to that, so we kind of just commit to it. So we end up going over orbital velocity there. You see, we reached 2400 meters a second, going less than 40k. So the heating, the drag was quite extreme. Made it quite entertaining, I'm not gonna lie. This has got a very quirky launch profile, but we do still make it to space with about 2.5 grand's worth of fuel left. Again, we left ourselves with a lot of fuel available here in the rocket. And you might be wondering, why are we going through all this effort? Why are we designing a rocket, a shuttle that barely works, and launching it with enough delta V to both leave and come back from Kerbin again? And that is very simple. We are en route to the space telescope that we set up a couple of episodes ago. It is time to do a little bit of maintenance on the optics and try and upgrade it later on. So we are testing the capability of this space plane, and also utilizing on its first mission. First live mission to do that maintenance. It is very far out. It is outside the orbit of Minmus, and you see there it takes quite a long time to get up there. We are 14 days in flight at the moment before we even reach the telescope, before we then go ahead and set ourselves up with a rendezvous and circle our way around. And again, it takes about another 2 weeks before we even make it to the course correction, and then another month or so before we even reach the telescope. So these guys have been in orbit for about 80 days, cramped in this cockpit at this point, just waiting to reach the telescope. That is how far out it is, and how long it took to set up the rendezvous. But Tamble then, finally happy to stretch her legs, she hops out of the crew cabin there, to float on over to the telescope. And the idea being that she obviously can perform the maintenance required. She is the engineer for the mission on board. Bill is around, but he is more of a flight engineer, and we open that service bay for Tamble to jump in. And in floats Tamble then to the service bay. We did extend the ladder, but for Kerbal physics being Kerbal physics, the entire telescope started spinning as soon as she grabbed it. So she floats on in to do it that way, grabs the optics module, and then heads back to the space plane. We are unfortunately not able to put the new optics module in there. The telescope needs a little bit of time to sort of decalibrate remotely before we can then stick the new optics in there. So in the meantime, we're going to send the crew back home to Kerbin, and they perform the deorbit burn here. They are coming in from a crazy high altitude here. We do have about 400 meters per second of delta V in in the tank to utilize if we need to slow down, but we want to see just how good this re-entry profile is. As you see there, we're entering from almost interplanetary speeds into the atmosphere. That Firefly re-entry mod looking absolutely gorgeous in the night sky as we do it. But thankfully, you know, the heat tolerance of this this space plane is pretty good. We bounce back off into space for a while, but we do not burn up in the atmosphere, more importantly. So we know we can take multiple approaches to get back home with this thing, should we need to. Before then, obviously, sort of circling around and having another attempt at it. Obviously, if we are... I don't think we'll ever really take this thing interplanetary, but it is a good sort of test for if we do want to use it to go to Minmus or something like that, right? This thing is pretty much designed to only go within the Kerbin system. But yeah, we do want to sort of stress test it at its extremes, right? So yeah, we do make our second pass. We're on quite a heavily inclined orbit, so you see we are trying to bank and force ourselves on a more equatorial thing in an attempt to try and reach the KSC. As you see, we're pulling some quite high angle of attack turns there before we then bounce back off into space for a second time. But yeah, we activate the navigation and... we are suborbital, I think, at this point. You see the speed there. We did bounce back off into space, but now we're once again on our way back down. And yeah, we once again are trying our best to redirect it. You see, it is kind of working. We are slowly starting to turn. We're on the opposite side of the planet to the KSC, though, so we attempt to go in towards Nye Island. It's not an airfield we've been to before. We don't have the rights there, but, you know, this is a bit of an emergency, right? Eventually, once the aircraft starts biting into the deeper parts of the atmosphere, we do start actually making that turn. But by this point, it is far too late to make it to Nye Island. This thing is very good at gliding once it reaches subsonic. Very draggy when it's supersonic, but unfortunately we are, you know, we're a good 220 kilometers away from Nye Island, and this is the only airfield really that is around for us to have a look at, right? So yeah, we line ourselves up and start the very optimistic process of trying to float our way down, but sadly we're still about another 100 kilometers away before we start needing to think about looking for a place to land. And Jeb, being the master of flying that he is, decides it's too risky. We can't put her down in the water, so he's going to attempt a grass side landing. Uses a bit of fuel just to clear these trees ahead of us and spots a nice open area to turn the aircraft round to try and put her down. So he tells Bill and Tamble to brace, and starts the process to try and ditch the craft in the middle of this field. And, well, manages to nice and gently put it down, but obviously because of the terrain, we do kind of get airborne again a little bit. But thankfully, with the drogue chutes and the use of the brakes, we do actually bring her to a stop. And the Kerbals can live to fly another day. So shout out to Jeb there. Top-notch flying by him, making the decision last second to divert and avoid the water landing. And yeah, we eventually recover the craft, and we then look to... we dip over to the astronaut complex quickly, because we realize we're acquiring quite a lot of fairly useless Kerbals. So we send them on their way. And then we accept another mission to expand our airport horizons, and we're heading off to the desert airfield there then. So for anyone that doesn't know, the desert airfield is a base game airfield. It's an alternate launch site way off to the west of the KSC. So you see we're performing quite a long turn after takeoff here to head over to that direction. And yeah, the flight once again goes off very, very simply. There's no other way to put it. You know, we get up to cruising altitude, and we float on over. So yeah, Jeb and Tamble and Bill from the last mission are obviously sat chilling and recuperating after their very near miss. You know, we send different crew members up, and we're gonna have a look inside the aircraft that we've been flying around quite a bit now without much else going on. Without really having had a look at it internally before, which I feel is a little bit criminal on my part. You know, we've got this free IVA mod. We're supposed to be able to walk around and explore the internals of our craft, and yet we very rarely have so far. But you know, as we get more sort of complex and bigger builds, then obviously we will take more opportunities to do so. But yeah, we walk around the cabin with one of the passenger Kerbals en route to the desert airfield and have a look out of the windows. And yeah, this mod adds so much functionality. Well, I say functionality, so much fun to the game. Being able to walk around your craft and stuff like that, it adds just a whole new depth to the building and the sandbox element, right? So yeah, we're definitely going to be utilizing this more often throughout the rest of the career. However, obviously, the airport inspector, the passenger Kerbal, does eventually take her seat, and yeah, we've got Gwen and Ian Cloutop as our flight crew at the minute, and yeah, we're just clearing we're already descending, but we're just going to clear these mountains before we then descend finally again into the desert airfield. So a couple of flights so far this episode, but yeah, like I said, we're unlocking different parts of Kerbin and sort of exploring. But yeah, we set ourselves up on a nice, easy approach, somewhat similar to what we did at the start with Cojave Sands, and we set ourselves up on a nice approach here. Very basic runway. It's a sand sort of, yeah, it's like a sand runway, like a sandstone sort of thing, but no taxiways or anything to speak of. So we try and be a bit gentle, but then we kind of flare a little bit too early and bounce down onto the runway. Thankfully, the landing gear handles it, and we go ahead and taxi to the terminal. We signed the paperwork with the business Kerbals again, letting us use the airfield should we need to, before lining ourselves up and setting off back home. So again, take off nice and easy, and we float on over. We could do a little bit more, yeah, we do a little bit more of moving of fuel again this time around. I don't know if we show it on camera, but yeah, we by the time we've flown all the way back to the KSC, you see the sun sets behind us, and we are flying into the darkness. Again, I love the sunsets with the mod pack that we've got, but it does make the landings a little bit more interesting when we're struggling to see the runway. We do, however, bring ourselves into a nice gradual descent, nice gentle approach into the KSC here, as yeah, we look to touch down. We we do float it on in once again, but yeah, a bit of a smoother landing this time, and yeah, we eventually taxi our way down the edge of the runway. We use more of the runway than what we were planning. We missed that middle exit, and yeah, we end up taxiing a bit longer, but we do bring her to a stop and yeah, complete that flight without any further issues. But speaking of completing, that is this episode once again complete, and that is the end of the episode, guys. Again, do give me your thoughts on sort of the content, the commentary, and all that sort of stuff. And leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. There's plenty more coming. I think I batch recorded all this all the way up to like episode 29 or something dumb like that. So we've still got at least another 13 more videos to come, right? Before we get onto sort of the more recent stuff. But no, I appreciate you guys watching along as always, and yeah, thank you all for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Goodbye.